The good media news for the Pac-12, I think, makes it more likely they want UNLV.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest, craziest sport on planet Earth. Colorado's buzzing in the transfer portal. Is NIL good for the group of five? In some ways. That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So, the Pac-12 media deal is not finalized for 2026 because the conference isn't actually done for 2026. We're still waiting around to see who the 8th all-sports member is going to be. I think UNLV is the top desired target. Texas State can enter into this conversation as well. They are certainly an option. If Texas State were the Pac-12's top target, I think they would have done it already. Because what has been established previously, and I think is pretty well understood at this point, or at least I hope, by people listening to or watching this show, no one that the Pac-12 adds is substantially or materially or even at all altering the value of the media rights contract. So that's the next step, is they've gotten ESPN and they've gotten CBS and the CW as a part of their media rights deal for 2025 with a two-team conference that's Oregon State and Washington State. CBS is going to show the two games between those teams, which is not unprecedented, but is definitely rare. I think Liberty, New Mexico State last did it in 2018, where they played twice in a scheduled sense going into a 12-game year. And I think that for the Pac-12, Texas State is the most available option. They do have some real value, and they could be a good addition to the Pac-12. If they wanted to do it, they're a pretty cheap option. Getting out of the Sun Belt is easier than getting out of the American or potentially the Mountain West. I think they would have done that already. It doesn't mean that it won't happen. It just means I think the Pac-12 is zeroing in on UNLV as their top option. And I say that for two reasons. Number one, I don't know that there's anybody in the Pac-12 who wants, the New World Pac-12, who wants to travel to San Marcos, Texas. Not that it doesn't seem like a perfectly nice place or somewhere in which you can have a good game day environment. I'm sure it is. But you have to remember, football is driving the bus. Presidents vote on realignment. Put that on my gravestone. Presidents vote on all this stuff. You know who presidents do sometimes think about? Non-football sports. Do they want to send everybody, and it costs more, to go on a Texas trip, or would they rather have Las Vegas, which is right in the center of the footprint? So the fact that the Pac-12 is, making an inroad of getting ESPN to be potentially one of their media partners for 2026 and beyond. I mean, if you've got them interested in just Oregon State and Washington State, how are they not at least interested at being at the table for conversations for a conference that has those two schools and Boise State and San Diego State and Fresno State and Utah State and Colorado State? Hard to see how they wouldn't at least be intrigued. And so I think the geography is certainly there for UNLV, but the other side of this and how the recent media revelation fits into all of this is now, if you are the Pac-12, you can go to UNLV and you could potentially sell them on, you're not going to have a big exposure gap here because right now you're playing on the Mountain West contract, which is Fox and CBS. Well, if you come over and it's ESPN and CBS, that's a pretty legitimate pitch to make. Now, the one hiccup here is what we're still waiting to have resolved, and that is the legal fight, battle, situation, whatever you want to call it, between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West. Because the biggest reason UNLV, who the Pac-12 wanted before, but the Mountain West gave a bunch of financial incentives to in order to keep them in the conference, if the exit or poaching fees get nullified or significantly reduced in court, then the Pac-12 might be able to go in at UNLV and say, hey, we want you to come here and you're going to get more money on this contract than whatever the Mountain West gets. And I'm sure the Mountain West will get a television deal. I don't think that league is on the brink of implosion. It's just going to look very, very different after losing a lot of its top schools. There is no way that on a per school basis, the Mountain West is going to be able to match what the Pac-12 is going to give its schools. I cannot see how, when you lose that much talent from a football and revenue and content standpoint, how you lose all of that and all of a sudden you're getting the same amount. Like that just doesn't track. So adding one school, as the Pac-12 is going to have to do at some point, that's not significantly diluting your media value enough on a per school basis per se, because you're just adding one. Now, if you bring in two or if you bring in three, now you're starting to make a more significant inroad there, but they have to add one. And if it's just UNLV, I don't think that increases the value of the deal. It's obviously not going to significantly decrease the value of the deal, because whoever they put in there, I think it's going to be the same. So this is now the mission for Teresa Gold, the Pac-12 commissioner, and Gloria Nevarez, the commissioner of the Mountain West as well. Gold has to now figure out how she goes about sorting this through with, who the media rights partners are going to be, how much they can get, and what they can offer to UNLV. Because the financial incentives were in the tens of millions of dollars for UNLV to stay in the Mountain West, because Gloria Nevarez knows, that's a school we really want to keep around. We want to keep committed here to the conference. But if you're the Pac-12, you kind of tried to get them the first time, and one of the obstacles is, it's going to cost a lot to leave. You're going to dip into the war chest. You won't have as much. Well, now you could offer not just a better television deal from an exposure, but also from a financial standpoint. I think that's a serious appeal. And you couple that with the geography. It's why I've said for a long time, UNLV should be the top target. UNLV should be the top target. It makes the most sense. Their football program is trending up. That's what matters above all else. And I think that if you're the Pac-12 trying to make this pitch, the media deal is certainly a part of it. But this does come down to the litigation going on between the two conferences. Because if it costs too much, I don't think that would be worth it. I think UNLV, as long as it doesn't cost you, extra tens of millions of dollars in exit or poaching fees that, they're trying to figure out in court, if you at least get that negotiated down to a more reasonable price, take UNLV. But paying full price, essentially what it would be, that's probably actually not worth it, in my view, compared to just adding Texas State. Then you have to bite the bullet, swallow the pill, take your medicine however you see it, and say, all right, we're going to introduce Texas trips. And there are upsides there. There are serious upsides to making an inroad as a conference in the state of Texas. You have so much recruiting talent there. Having your programs actually go and play football games and giving your coaches opportunities to have kids come and watch play out there, however often that happens, getting into the television market out there, like that I think would be, it has benefits. I'll just say it certainly has benefits. I just know, given the amount of public griping that we have seen from schools and new conferences that have tough geographic situations, there's always going to be more than that behind the scenes. Like, just because you've only heard, I think it was Cal men's basketball, UCLA head coach Mick Cronin talking about the travel, like plenty of schools have said it publicly. I can almost guarantee you they are even more annoyed with it, shall we say. Maybe not frustrated, like, oh, we got to get out of this situation. Just like, man, this is a long trip. This is a lot of travel. So I think that's a non-zero consideration. I don't think it's a driving force, but I do think it's a contributing factor to UNLV being the top desired target. Because if Texas State were option number one, you could have brought them in already and then gone and got your deal. But neither one of them is going to change the calculus of the media rights deal. So you wait to see what's going to happen in the litigation here. And you go to UNLV now, and if it's cheaper and more affordable for them to leave the Mountain West and go to the Pac-12, if you're able to go to them and say, hey, we got ESPN on board for this year, we're going to get them on board for next year as well. Maybe we'll get Fox as well instead of the CW, which I think would be an upgrade. But between CBS, ESPN, and Fox, if you can pitch two of those as a media rights partner, I think UNLV would take a serious look at being in a conference that would pay them more, get them better exposure, and give them a better chance, quite frankly, of making the college football playoff, where they were on the doorstep this past season. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. We're going to Boulder next. You know why? Because the Buffs are buzzing. First, this episode brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25, a favorite of mine, to Call of Duty as easily as you stream your favorite shows. Already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Head to Amazon.com/FireTV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. Check them out and get your Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K today. Boulder is a buzzin' in the transfer portal. Kevin Borba of Locked On Buffs is here to discuss just that because Hakeem Williams, a former 5-star recruit, is headed to Colorado. And I have to say, Kevin, the hilarity of this particular move is not lost on me. I don't know if you saw the post that Hakeem Williams made back when he committed to Florida State out of high school, that he wasn't going to be a Travis Hunter type, a recruit from the state of Florida that winds up at Colorado. And here we are, because nothing means anything. Words are just words. No one means anything they say, apparently. I thought that was funny. But I think this is a pretty high upside pickup for the Buffs, who have now added a couple of receivers in this spring transfer portal window. What do you make of the Hakeem Williams addition?
First of all, he was young then. He didn't know anything.
he was basically a kid 2 years ago. Now he's
grown. He learned from his mistakes. No, I think it's a great flyer, right? He didn't quite live up to his 5-star rating in Florida State due to injuries and other reasons, but at the same time, anytime you could get a former 5-star, there's that potential there. So if Colorado can unlock him, he's going to pair nice with Joseph Williams and then Sincere Brown, who's 6'5". So they've got a nice new receiver core to replace Spencer, the most wide receivers drafted in the NFL draft this past weekend, Colorado. So they have to replace.
Really?
Yeah.
Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn,
and LeJounte Wester.
And no one else had 3 receivers drafted.
Guess not.
Hey, that's a non-zero stat. I actually didn't know that. That's pretty good.
Yeah. So, I mean, Colorado has to replace all that talent, and I think they have a couple young guys like Draylon Miller or Marion Miller, the Miller brothers, who aren't actually brothers. They remind me of like the Aldon Smith and Justin Smith, where they're like the Smith brothers, but they're clearly not brothers.
Did you know that Bo Nix and Tez Johnson are brothers?
I did not. I'm familiar with the story, but I love the constant storylines in college football. Ryan Williams is only 17.
He's going to be 17 for the rest of his life.
He has to be, honestly.
Has to be.
But I think if Colorado has an offense like they did last year, or they hope to have an offense like they did last year, they need a lot of receiver talent. And they've added a lot of offensive linemen. They've added some talented quarterbacks to replace Deion Sanders, and they just need some ingredients around them, some guys around them. And I think Hakeem Williams, the potential's there, right? He has to stay healthy. He has to fit in and maybe apologize for the Travis Hunter post. Would you apologize? Would you?
I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious if a reporter actually asks him about it at any point in time, or if anybody asks him about it, like, hey, do you remember when you made that? What changed? And what answer he would give. I wonder if he even remembers making that post, honestly.
It felt like one of those things where when you commit, you're just so hyped to be a part of your program. But nowadays, it's like everything's very temporary. Like these guys commit to a program, and then 5 minutes later, they're like, hey, by the way, I'm out. And it's like, what happened to I'm bleeding whatever color?
Yeah. Yeah, it is a strange phenomenon, especially with the guys who commit in like the December signing period and then are in the portal by April, or sooner. It's like, what happened to I'm all the way committed, 100%, all glory to God. Like, whoa, we backtracked. We walked that one back a little bit.
God said, never mind.
I guess. I don't know how that thinking all goes down, but I do think that for Williams, it gives Colorado a different look with their receiving core, because He's well over 6 feet tall. Sincere Brown is 6'5". That's not what the receiving core was based on last year. Amarion Miller is what, 6'1", 6'2"?
Both the Millers are like 6'1", 6'2". So
yeah, and he was kind of the biggest, or at least the tallest receiver that Colorado had last year. So how does that change their passing game going to these guys that are, certainly capable after the catch? It's not like they can't run with the football, but none of these guys are Jimmy Horn or Travis Hunter types out there.
Yeah, I think it gives the quarterbacks a little more room for error, honestly, right? You just look at what a big receiver brings you. It's like sometimes you don't want this to always be the go-to, but it's like, hey, Hakeem might be down there somewhere kind of mentality where it's like you could take more risk, right? You have Caden Salter who, although he's one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country, he took a step back last year. And I think he could return to that 2023 form, but I think you have to give him some confidence and build up his confidence. And having some guys with some long wingspans, some high verticals who are tall already, I think that helps. And I think also, not that this really matters, but people have always said Colorado's a small team. Their transfer class this year specifically has been aggressively large. Like whether it's the offensive lineman, there's a lot of 6'5", 350 guys. Sincere Brown at wide receiver, 6'5". You just highlighted all the receivers getting a lot bigger. So I think Colorado is sort of gearing up towards what we see are the successful teams in college football, right? Because for the most part, not that you have to be the biggest team to win, but Ohio State wasn't small, right? Notre Dame had some big offensive linemen. All the SEC schools are known for being big and fast. And so I think Colorado is sort of shifting into that like gear of being built that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. It's just going to be so different. So many. You're not going to have Shedeur Sanders back there. We're not going to have that conversation. We could, but we're not going to. That's not what this segment is about. And your receivers are going to look different, but there is some continuity on this coaching staff, right? So offensively, kind of seems like the game plan is probably going to be pretty similar, where it's still going to be an air-focused attack. Like, it's not a coincidence that Colorado's bringing in these receivers, right? I mean, when Sincere Brown entered, he was one of the most highly coveted transfer targets at his position. He goes to Colorado. Why? Because even though Amarion Miller's already there, or the quote-unquote Miller brothers, you still know Colorado's going to throw the ball around the yard a lot.
Yeah, and I think there's something that needs to be said about Colorado's ability to go out and get a guy like Sincere Brown, right? I think, like you said, Texas A&M, I mean, you didn't say this, but a lot of people wanted him. Texas A&M, a lot of major programs were after him. So Colorado has really been able to stand out in the portal. And I don't really know if it's NIL related, because obviously Shedeur and Travis were funding a lot of their NIL stuff last year. But I think if you just look at the continuity, the confidence that the staff has in, I guess, their quarterbacks, right? I don't think you bring in all these receivers if you don't think you're going to sling the ball around. And just the confidence that you could build off of last year, I feel like this Colorado offense is sort of finding an identity early, right? And I think that's something that they haven't had in years past, where it's like it's week 3 and we're like, okay, what is this Colorado team going to do? Like, we still don't understand it. And I think they're trying to get that out of the way now.
By the way, when you said earlier, he might lack a little confidence, I wondered if you were Ron Washington talking about Scott Hatterberg. The nice way to say it is he lacks confidence. So give him some.
He gets on base.
He gets on base. And of course, the F it Justin Jefferson is down there somewhere is a forever football meme. But these are not the only moves that Colorado's made in the portal. They were poking around Harrison Taggart, the linebacker transfer from BYU, but they've added an offensive lineman and a safety from Tennessee. Kevin, are these starters in your view, or are these just kind of nice depth pieces?
I think the offensive lineman has a chance to be a starter. I think safety, possibly. They already brought in a safety from Auburn, so they're going to have quite a interesting safety battle, if you will. But their offensive line, let me run you through their offensive linemen, just because they've made some splashes that I don't think are getting enough attention. Larry Johnson, big dude, right? I don't feel like a lot of people are familiar with the fella, but he's played in, I think it was 22 games at Tennessee, and he comes in, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull this up as we speak.
We can tell.
Filibuster for me.
We can tell. Colorado's offensive line has been the worst in all of Power 4.
The app that Elon built just crashed, so I had a nice tweet written up, and the app that Elon built crashed. So I apologize for that. You never know what he's 6'7", 350, right? And I think counting him,
that's a lot of man.
That's a lot of men. Xavier Hill was another guy they brought in.
Great addition.
Right. They just keep bringing in offensive linemen. And I think that, Spencer, and you just kind of filibustered for me as I was panicking for 10 seconds there.
You're welcome.
They've had a bad offensive line, right? It's no secret. So what do? They go out and add Larry Johnson, 6'7", 350, Xavier Hill, 6'4", 318, Mana Tamini, 6'4", 345, Zylan Chrysler, 6'6", 335, Zarian McGill, 6'2", 308. Like, they're just Aki Oji, 6'4", 315. Like, they are adding guys with experience, with size, and physicality. And I also think they're trying to find the perfect formula, which they have not been able to do for the past 2 years. And so if they have 10 guys that they could figure it out, like some sort of combination, I think that's probably the smartest move, because if you're going to try to build an offensive line every single year in the portal, you have to have options.
Yeah, and I do wonder if that's a good long-term strategy, or if at some point they need to just invest in high school recruiting more and, not find just one Jordan Seaton, but go find 2 or 3 per cycle and develop guys over the course of the year. That's where I think the best offensive lines in college football have typically come from. I don't think that's a coincidence. Right. I do like the moves they've made, and Seaton is back, right? Yep. So you got a former 5-star who's going into his second year, and Xavier Hill, Brian Smith of the Portal podcast said that he was one of his favorite offensive linemen that moved the entire portal offseason, regardless of the spring or winter window. Like, I like those pickups. I think it can be better. Is it going to be a strength, though? I don't know. Probably neat. Like, Salter can, of course, move. Juju Lewis can move a little bit, whoever's going to be back there. But, at some point, I just wonder if Deion's going to realize, maybe we need to go to the high school ranks and, build guys and let them grow together over the course of 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, and I think I said this last year all the time. If they could just be average, who knows what the ceiling
just
of the
average.
Team. It's average, please. Like, you ranked 133rd in sacks allowed. Maybe rank 60th. Right? Maybe rank 60th or 70th.
75th would be a massive upgrade.
Right. And so I totally agree with you, right? I don't think there's unless this works out. I think that's the only problem, or not really a problem, because if it works out, it's great. But if it does work out, he's gonna be like, well, here we go, round 3. Let's do it again, round 4. And so I think it really needs to fail for him to change that strategy. But I think there's a trend around college football, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Locked on College Football. Coaches value guys who are older. Like, that is just what's in, guys who are older and who have played at other programs. And so
when you have access to the portal, there are definitely some young guys who 5 to 10 years ago would be playing for teams and are not, because of a handful of transfers that were available to come in and plug a need.
Yeah, and it almost seems like nowadays, where if you don't start within your freshman or sophomore year, like, you're cooked as a recruit. Like, that's just pure transfer material. And so I think Deion Sanders is going to keep doing the transfer thing until it blows up even more. I personally would want to do what you said, build some continuity, because imagine if they brought in Jordan Seaton and a left guard who is in his class that started right away. That side of the line is locked up for the next 2 or 3 years, whereas now it's like, okay, we have Jordan Seaton next year, and then Xavier Hill is going to leave, right? Zarian McGill is probably going to graduate or whatever, and this guy's going to graduate, and it's like, okay, we have one returning lineman again.
Yeah,
and
you're going to be starting over.
That's not a fun situation to be in. I just don't think that's a realistic strategy, but I digress. We'll see if it works out this year.
On the flip side of the coin, though, Colorado got better in Deion's first year from the year prior, and they got better in his second year from his first year. So say whatever you like, and we can have our questions. I think these are fair questions to ask. The end result is, are you winning football games? Yeah. Just won 9 games, and people looked at it and went, was that all that you did? Like, that's a pretty big deal for Colorado to be 9 wins.
Your program is like really in the right direction. When people are like, oh, really, 9 wins? It's like, okay,
yes, that is a sign.
One of the 2 years ago.
Yes, that is a sign you're going in the right direction. Kevin Borba, Locked On Buffs, great as always. NIL and the Group of 5. Is it all bad news? Maybe not. First, this episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. All in one convenience, that's what they're all about. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Check them out at monarchmoney.com. All right, so I got an interesting question. You can always submit one as well. Hit me up on Twitter. Just shoot me a DM at smclaughlin.cfb. DC sent this one in. I'm a huge fan of Ashton Jeanty, but I do think if he was in a Power 4 conference, he would have been the second best back in college behind Scadaboo. Interesting take. I don't agree, but okay. Now he's top 5 highest paid in the NFL because of an incredible season in the Group of 5 conference. Do you think upcoming recruits may look to go Group of 5 to stat pad, knowing they may actually grade higher to NFL scouts? Imagine if Derrick Henry played at UNLV instead of going to Bama. He'd have a 3,000-yard season and would have been a top 10 pick, but he went round 2. So I see where your head is at, and I think this is a really interesting conversation, hence why I'm bringing it up here on the show. Part of the draft selection that you saw with Ashton Jeanty is a product of a resurgence of an emphasis on running backs. That is something that is very real in the NFL. Saquon Barkley went to the Eagles. They won the Super Bowl. Christian McCaffrey isn't there for the 49ers. They're not the same team. Jahmyr Gibbs with the Lions, impact guy. Like, there was a growing sentiment in the NFL with running backs in particular that these guys are kind of a dime a dozen. And Kyle Shanahan at the 49ers contributed to that, because he was making Jeff Wilson look good. Raheem Mostert was good. It's like, oh, there's undrafted free agents, 7th round pick. So it's about scheme and offensive line. I agree with that to an extent. It is hard to deny the results that the running backs we've seen really surge in the last several years. Jonathan Taylor with the Colts being another one. It's hard to argue with those results. So I think that's part of why Derrick Henry fell to the 2nd round instead of being a top 10 pick. I do think you make a really interesting point. And this is where NIL comes into play in a good sense for Group of 5 schools. There is more money than you probably think. Of course, there's more at Power 4 schools. You can put together a non-zero amount at places that you as a college football fan, whoever you root for, might look at and say, they can't win a national championship. You know, was Boise State ever capable of winning a national championship last year? No, I don't think so. Could they ever one day? Exceedingly difficult. I lean towards no. I've been wrong before. We'll see how these things continue to cycle and build, because it can take a really long time. But for a school like Boise State that does care about football a whole heck of a lot, Ashton Jeanty was getting somewhere, based on what I've read and been told, in the neighborhood of around $500,000 to $600,000. It was kind of in the $500,000 range. I don't know the exact amount. If he had gone to a Power 4 school, he would have been into 7 figures. Absolutely. And it is pretty rare to find a guy who prioritizes where he is, the culture he's been a part of, the program that recruited him, and recognizing, you know what, they're taking care of me enough, and I don't need to I'll get that money in the NFL. That calculation, I think, is interesting, because you can see guys that might go to a bigger school. Maybe they don't play as much. You know, think about Quinshon Judkins. He was at Ole Miss, and he was pretty much the number 1 guy, and he goes to Ohio State knowing he's about to split carries. If Quinshon Judkins had gone, and I can guarantee you Ohio State, I don't know the exact number, they paid him plenty. If he'd gone to a Group of 5 school and just gone crazy, had an Ashton Jeanty level season, yeah, he could have absolutely upped his draft stock, because production ultimately gets you attention in the NFL, no matter where you're coming from. And so that option's there. Here's the other consideration that guys are going to have, though. Ohio State won the national championship. Was Boise State ever going to do that? Probably not. And so I look at what Jeanty did this past year. I think he is more of an exception than what is becoming the rule. You know, you think about a guy like John Mateer. John Mateer could have come back to Washington State. He would have had an NIL package that passed 7 figures, according to reports. So he would have been over $1 million to play quarterback for the Cougars. He could have put up big-time stats. Now he goes to Oklahoma. He got more money to go there. How's he going to look to the NFL draft scout community after a season at Oklahoma playing in the SEC? Maybe not quite as appealing. And look, Jeanty might not have been a top 5 pick. I still think he would have been really good. Because the other thing you have to consider is if he'd gone to a Power 4 school, Power 5, and had a good offensive line or a place that's really committed to running the football, he would have put up crazy numbers. The guy was awesome. He ran for 194 and 3 touchdowns against Oregon last year. He went for 100 against Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl. So his 2 games against the teams that squared off the Big Ten championship game, he averaged about 150 yards a game. Maybe his numbers would not have been as crazy. I agree with you. He still would have been a really high draft pick. He still would have been really good. Pushing for Barry Sanders' record? Probably not. If you go run in the Big Ten and once a year you run into the Ohio State defense or the Michigan defense or Oregon's defense or anybody like that, Penn State. Again, Penn State, he had to work really hard to go for 100 yards, but that was also with Boise State's offensive line, which was good, but certainly not as good as what some other places would be able to do for him in that particular setting. Like he is not a scheme or one place dependent back, or he's not dependent upon being in the Group of 5 level. So I think it's an interesting conversation. I think, with NIL in the portal, there are definitely downsides for Group of 5 schools. Washington State put together everything they could. They made a whole presentation and pitch when Jake Dickert was still there to keep John Mateer. They just didn't have enough money. And he's at Wake Forest now. There's nothing you can do about that. Sometimes you just got to make your best and say, they've just got more. The door swings both ways, though. Because how often do you see guys going from the Power 4 ranks down to Group of 5 schools because they are going to get enough in NIL and they're a caliber of athlete that ordinarily wouldn't roll through a Group of 5 school? That happens pretty frequently, not just at premium positions, but at all sorts of positions across the country. So, for every Darian Mensah at Duke, where, Tulane, Group of 5 school, the quarterback gets poached because Duke can pay him $4 million a year over 2 years. Yeah, that's a hard part of it. I don't think you're going to see guys, at the highest level take that step backwards. What I do think you can see as a product of NIL in the portal is guys will have the chance to succeed at the Group of 5 ranks and still make a lot of money. They just might make more if they go somewhere else. And that's going to be based on each individual player. Some guys are, this place recruited, developed me. I care about that. I want to stay here, win, make the most of it with my guys. And then other guys are, I can get more money to play on a bigger stage of college football over there. Ashton Jeanty, though, an exception, not the rule. I don't think he's going to kickstart a trend. But I do like where your head is at. Good question. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.